Are you concerned that your eating patterns might be binge eating disorder? By the end of this video, you'll know the warning signs for binge eating disorder and whether you meet the clinical criteria. Start your journey towards better relationship with food and your body. Managing an eating disorder can be a lonely journey. For in-depth information and strategies for managing your eating disorder, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell in the corner so you're notified when I post a new video every Wednesday. I'm Meredith MacKenzie of Parallel Wellness. I'm a registered clinical counselor and eating disorder therapist. In my work with hundreds of clients with eating disorders, I've supported them to loosen the grips of their eating disorder, including binge eating, and live fulfilling lives with freedom from food and compensatory behaviors. Now it's your turn. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the warning signs for binge eating disorder so that you can get a better sense of whether your behaviors match up with some of these or if you should be concerned and possibly work with a doctor, a dietitian, and a psychologist or therapist. In my previous video, I talked about the differences between disordered eating versus an eating disorder. So if you haven't checked that video out, you might want to go check that out first before continuing with this one. But I want you to keep some of those same principles in mind. The way we engage in our eating and exercise and how we even feel about our bodies and our weight and our shape exists on a continuum. It can be really difficult for a person to assess themselves and determine if they fit in one category or another because, some days you might be engaging more in a behavior that you might think is disordered and other days you don't. So as you watch this video, I hope you get a better sense for that. While the warning signs that I'm going to discuss in this video do map onto the criteria that are listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, version 5 or the DSM-5, that psychologists, therapists, doctors, psychiatrists use for diagnosing clients with an eating disorder, I want you to know that this video does not constitute any type of assessment of your symptoms. So if you are curious or you are concerned about your symptoms, definitely go see your family doctor, a therapist, or a dietitian first to get that type of assessment. I'm hoping that this video is more of an opportunity for you to screen yourself and to maybe get an awareness of, this is a problematic thing that's going on for me and I do want to get some help. I want to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. If you know that you were easily triggered into binge eating and that would be incredibly distressing for you just by merely talking of symptoms, I want you to take care of yourself at this point. And if now is not a good time to be watching this video, please pause it. If you feel like it might be something you want to come back to at a later time, definitely save it in your watch later playlist, but don't do anything that's going to harm yourself by watching something before you're ready for it or if you know it would likely be triggering for you. The first warning sign you want to look out for is eating an unusually large amount of food over a short period of time, such as 2 hours. Now, this is different from overeating or maybe eating, just past that feeling of fullness, because that happens to a lot of us. A lot of us, you sit down for Thanksgiving dinner and you're going to put more on your plate than you typically would. And that's actually part of normal eating. It's really difficult for anybody to define what normal eating is because all of us have a different amount that we would typically eat and feel comfortable with. And especially when we're at celebrations or say you're at the movies and you're eating popcorn, there's going to be times in our lives that we're going to eat more than we typically would. And that's just overeating. And that's nothing to really be too concerned about. As well, that 2-hour time period or that finite amount of time is really important to think about because binge eating is not the same as grazing throughout the day or, picking and nibbling at food and, spreading out your eating throughout the day. Some people are grazers and some people prefer to eat their meals spread out throughout the day rather than larger meals at, 3 times a day. So when you consider what a typical meal might look like for you on any other day other than a day that you would consider to be a day that you binge ate, what would that meal size be? Consider that. And when you think about your binge eating episodes as you're thinking of them, are you eating more than you typically would at that specific meal or snack? When I talk to clients about their binge eating behaviors, they often report that they tend to eat very differently than they would from a typical meal. And as we get further into the video, I'm going to provide some examples to try to bring some of these warning signs to life. The second warning sign is feeling that your eating behavior is out of control. Clients with binge eating disorder often talk to me about feeling almost as though, the same way that you would breathe or that your heart would beat at its own pace, there's this kind of automaticity to the way you do things, that's almost the same way that they feel when they're in the middle of a binge eating episode. That they're eating and they're compulsively eating to a point where they're not fully in the driver's seat of it, but they're being driven to continue. Some clients also report almost feeling as though they're detached from the experience or that they're observing themselves doing it without feeling fully embodied in the experience of eating, almost a bit like they're dissociating in that moment. Clients that I've worked with who have experienced a sense of loss of control with their eating during a binge eating episode, they'll sometimes also pair it with experiences that they've had with restricting their food prior to meals. So maybe they haven't eaten very much throughout the day and they're really saving a lot of their intended eating for the evening. And when this happens, because because the body is so deprived of any kind of nourishment, the body's drive for food really kicks in at this point as well. And because you have low insulin and low blood sugar, your body really almost takes over in that point. People will describe to me that they feel this sense of loss of control where maybe they know that dinner is around the corner, but they find themselves snacking on something and then grabbing another snack and another snack and another snack, where it doesn't even necessarily matter about the quality of the food that they're eating or if they're particularly enjoying the food that they're eating, but they're almost in a trance-like state where they just keep going, feeling that real sense of loss of control. The third warning sign you want to look for binge eating disorder is eating when you're not hungry or eating when you're already full. And now this can look very different across people. For some people, they don't have a great sense of their hunger and satiation cues. What often happens for people with binge eating disorder, as well as other eating disorders, is that there's almost a detachment between the mind and the body. Things can be happening within the body, but restriction of food or overeating of food, binge eating, are ways of regulating ourselves on an emotional and physiological level. And because of this detachment between the mind and the body, it's a lot harder to tap into, am I hungry? Am I a little bit hungry? Am I very hungry? And so people with binge eating disorder can often miss those cues completely and eat anyways. Or even if they do have a recognition of that sensation of fullness, that the emotional needs for regulation are greater. And so with the paired experience of eating being a really emotionally regulating experience for them, they may continue to eat because that's one way that they're able to regulate and self-soothe. If you've ever experienced that disconnection or lack of awareness of your hunger cues, I'm really curious, what has worked for you to bring that sensation back online? You're not alone in that experience, and so I'd really like to create a community where people can talk about these issues together. So leave a comment in the comment section down below so I can respond to it and possibly include it in a future video. The fourth warning sign is eating rapidly during a binge eating episode. And this pairs up with that sense of lack of control with eating. There's this real drive that people describe when they talk about their binge eating episodes that feels almost like they've got an internal motor that is just set and focused on one thing, and that is eating and consuming food. So what this looks like is maybe taking bigger bites, not savoring food in your mouth and really sensing the flavors, chewing less, swallowing quickly, taking another bite really quickly. And what I hear from a lot of my clients is that they don't really enjoy what they're eating. Maybe there is a really bold flavor sensation that they're receiving from that food, which they are aware of, but they're not enjoying it the way they would have previously or what they have experienced at other times. And this adds to that feeling of loss of control, where the motivation for eating that food is a little lost to them. And when we think about the fight, flight, freeze response and that desire to be in a rest and digest state when we are relaxed, especially when we're eating, that's what we're trying to achieve. This is not an experience for people who are in a binge eating episode. To be able to relax and enjoy and leisurely eat something, that is kind of completely opposite to what this experience of binge eating is like. There's a very urgent feeling to this type of eating. The fifth warning sign is eating until you're uncomfortably full. Now, we already talked about eating when you're already full or you're not hungry and that loss of sensation with hunger and satiation cues. And this is similar to that. Again, with that disruption in the mind-body connection, people who are binge eating can often, zone out. I think that a lot of times binge eating can be paired with things like watching television or watching YouTube videos, where again, like the goal of it really is to disassociate with whatever is distressing within the body or the mental experience at the time. And as you're disassociating from those physiological experiences, you are also disassociating from that sensation of hunger. So a lot of times people will say to me that they are aware that they're starting to have the sensation of fullness or that they're pushing past that sensation of fullness, but the real sensation of being truly very full doesn't hit them until after the binge eating episode has finished. So in the moment, they may feel as though they're able to keep pushing or that they want to keep pushing and eating more. However, it's afterwards where they really start to feel a lot of pain in their stomach and digestive system. Another warning sign of binge eating is eating alone or in secrecy. Now, I am going to talk about the emotional impacts of binge eating disorder, but this really goes along with it because there is a very true experience of shame related to binge eating. And so people who engage in binge eating disorder, they tend to eat alone. It's not something that they want to share with the people that they love and care about. There is the awareness that, other people may judge you for eating in this way. And for the clients that I've worked with, binge eating tends to be an experience that is very personal. It's something that they do to feel safe and relaxed and comforted when they're on their own. And it's also something that they do when they feel distressed and the need to regulate themselves emotionally and physiologically. That's something that they want to be able to do in privacy. One thing to think about if you're noticing this maybe in yourself or a loved one is that this doesn't go along with what we would socially think about eating in our society. Typically, or what you might think of as more normalized eating, people have large meals and celebrations and treats and snacks and desserts and all the good stuff in a celebration atmosphere. So you might be having ice cream and popcorn with your family and everyone's joining in together, or you're eating a large meal together, and that's something that's a shared experience. And binge eating disorder and the binges that you experience with this disorder happen for the most part completely on your own and in privacy. And again, going back to the warning sign of eating even when you're not hungry, an example that I can give is clients that I've worked with who will go out for an enjoyable meal with family, and they'll eat a complete meal, they'll be satiated, it's a great meal, and then they're also planning in the back of their mind a binge for later in the evening and planning out where they're going to be getting those foods and then going home and eating again, even though they've just eaten a meal to the point that they're feeling satisfied. It wouldn't be something that they would share with their friends or family that they were just eating with, and this goes along with that feeling of shame as well. The next warning sign I want to talk about is the emotional experience that is accompanied with binge eating disorder. If you're feeling depressed, ashamed, disgusted, guilty, or upset about your eating, that's a big warning sign to look out for. The reality is, and I'm not going to preach it here, but food does not have a moral value. And for many people who do experience any of these type of emotions about their eating behaviors, it's starting to get into at least disordered eating, if not an eating disorder. Now, from my experience working with clients, there is a very rapid shift in the emotions that they experience up to and during and then after their binge eating episodes. And this is, and not necessarily the experience for everybody, but with a planned binge, the excitement, the motivation, and the elation that leads up to the binge eating, maybe a bit of satisfaction and relief during, and then following that, really heavy feelings of shame, guilt, disgust, just being fully upset with yourself, followed by depression and maybe feeling hopeless about, can this change? Am I going to change? There's a whole range of emotions that people experience with binge eating disorder. And one of the big standout warning signs for me is how quickly these emotions change in relation to binge eating. And these emotions then feed back into that emotional dysregulation and how a person feels about themselves and their body and the relationship with food, which actually perpetuates the cycle and increases the likelihood that they're going to keep it a secret. And the final warning sign that I'm going to discuss is the engagement with dieting behavior. So they may attempt to restrict their eating at other times as an attempt to manage their weight, but because they're also engaging in binge eating, they're not seeing a loss of weight. They may be staying at the same weight, or in some cases, they're gaining weight. And this is a very common characteristic of the binge eating cycle, to be engaging in dieting behavior alongside the binge eating episodes. Now, it's important to know that alongside these warning signs, there are also some things that are not present in binge eating disorder that would be associated with other eating disorders. And the biggest one is not engaging in any type of compensatory behaviors. And without getting too into it, because I don't want to make this a triggering video, what compensatory behaviors is the opposite of ingesting energy. It's actually expending energy in other ways to compensate for the food that you've eaten during a binge eating episode. Those type of things would be more in line with bulimia nervosa. And the restrictive eating behaviors or dieting behaviors are not so restrictive that would better fit into an other unspecified eating disorder category. With all these warning signs of binge eating disorder in mind, I really want to, impress upon you the importance of working with professionals who are experts in this field. There are very different treatment methodologies for working with people who have binge eating disorder compared to somebody who has anorexia or nervosa. And so it's important that you receive the correct treatment for you that you're going to find helpful. So now you know about the warning signs of binge eating disorder. First thing I would suggest would be checking in with a professional. And then the second, if you're looking to start this journey and what is next, first stay tuned for next week's video, which will be published on Wednesday, where I'm going to talk about the binge eating cycle and how to stop it. I've also created a mindful eating log, which is a tool that I use frequently within my therapy practice with my clients with binge eating disorder. Click on the link in the description box down below, where you're going to be able to download this document and use it for yourself. You're going to want to check out my last video on the differences between disordered eating versus eating disorders. I've provided a link in the description box down below on that one. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends or anyone that you think might benefit from learning more about binge eating disorder. I look forward to seeing you in the next video on Wednesday.